Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming here today. I have the task of putting forward an evidence-based approach to planning that brings in planning, but also a lot of other issues that we're facing every day. So kind of like everything from demographics to education, socioeconomic profile, housing, etc. So I was thinking to myself, how am I going to do this within, 30 minutes approximately. I've been told I'm not allowed to go over 30 minutes. So how am I going to do this in 30 minutes? So I said I'm going to very simply start by setting the scene and then looking at the positives that we have and then very quickly show how we can take these positives and put forward an evidence-based approach that can help us, as the others were saying, start regenerating some activity into market, some investment, some lending and some growth and development. So very simply, my overview is look at the context, our current position, and I said working towards our strengths, this new approach, and then I'm going to put forward maybe 3 or 4 kind of salient points at the end for hopefully that you'll maybe bear in mind and when you leave here today. Okay, so looking at establishing the context, John Downey, my colleague, previously took us through kind of like the history of planning and where it was at. And basically, there has been in looking at recent years and say the last 10 years and where we're going forward, there has been a major change from 2010 onwards. So we've moved away from what was the conventional planning approach to this new evidence-based approach. And that primarily came in 2010. And one of the big requirements from that, particularly from the development plan point of view, was the introduction of core strategies. And development plans and local authorities having to undertake core strategies, not only about housing, but also how that core strategy links into demographics, office, retail, environmental. So it's a number of steps that is involved in producing that core strategy. And that evidence base is going to be ongoing, which is a very good thing. And it's going to show that how the planning on one side and development on the other side can match and be hand in hand and hopefully address some of the issues that have gone before. So in general terms, kind of up to this point of 2010, and I'm sure most people in the audience here would agree with this, the planning process has not been sufficiently evidence-based. Even as John was saying there has been inconsistency among local authorities, the decision-making process. Even the zonings, as John was saying, has been quite disparate and different from authority to authority. So it hasn't been evidence-based. And there is big issues about demand and supply. Demand has been in certain places quite high, and supply has been quite high in other places, and there's been a complete mismatch between this demand and supply. So there needs to be a realistic assessment for future planning growth, but also for decline, because there will be areas of decline as there has been in the last 10, 15, 20 years. So we have to plan both for growth and decline. And particularly if you look at some of the demographics that we've seen before and we've seen what I'll put forward, is that we have a decline in terms of profile. So our population pyramids, we're getting an older population profile, so we have to plan for those. So even though there might be a declining population in an area, in a small area or a part of a city, that profile is changing, so we still have to plan for those. So while you have growth and decline, you still have to do proper evidence-based. So it needs to be forward-looking. And picking up on what some of the people have said before, my kind of primary aim for you today is to think about what I'm putting forward as our principal urban centres and how our transportation corridors, which has enhanced dramatically over the last 10 years, and everybody says that's one good thing that's coming out with the Celtic Tiger, is our linkages, is to think about these primary urban centres and how, by maximising these, we can get more growth and more evidence-based into the market. Okay, John Downey showed you one of these slides before, and these are cartographs, and this shows you like how, this is at a national and county level, how the growth of Ireland has, over the last 10 years, been swayed towards the eastern seaboard, with some growth in Cork at county level. And so we've had growth from 3.9 up to approximately 4.6 million. So 9% increase over that period. Approximately 1% growth per annum, which is considered in demographic terms, this is considered as kind of natural replacement growth. That's at the national level. However, when you break that down into what I call the small areas or ED levels, you can clearly see here that Dublin and the eastern coast has basically taken over. You can see Cork is trying to fight back a bit, Limerick, Galway and Waterford, and then the rest is kind of all being pushed over. So like if you consider the Midlands, and the Midlands is one of our designated gateways, linked gateways, it's almost over beside Galway because it's just the pure power of Dublin and the GDA. And this is quite, I think this is quite a stark image. And again, what I'm trying to put forward is the principal urban centres. So you can clearly see here our principal centres and the dominance of these. And these, for us to be successful and to move forward, these are going to be very dominant going forward. And we have to build on these and the strengths of these. Looking then in terms of our balanced regional growth, as put forward in the NSS, we've had, to some extent, some level of balanced regional growth, but it's been primarily absorbed by the GDA and then the other 4 cities, as I mentioned. Drive time, John Downey spoke about drive time previously, and this is quite an interesting statistic. And we just did a very simple analysis here, and this drive time is 1 hour drive time from the city centres of our 5 centres that we've talked about. And you can see in that there's overlapping areas here within the 1 hour. And if I did an analysis, say, from an outer suburb of these cities, you'd actually get a much, much greater overlapping. But just look and say that drive time from our city centre. Just some statistics from that. The land mass that 1 hour drive time takes up is about 46% of our total area of Ireland. However, in population terms, it's approximately 75%. 3/4 of our population are living within these 1 hour drive times. So again, let's think of the focus of these centres and what they can do for our growth. They can enhance, by enhancing these, it can have a major impact on 75% of our population. So looking at these primary urban centres and linkages, and bringing these together, okay, you can see that, again, the Celtic Tiger has delivered very good linkages, and there is very close proximity now in time between these centres, and enhancing these centres can enhance the national position of the country. So I'm just going to take you through these centres, and I'm going to show you a couple of slides here now from each of the centres, and it's to give you kind of to let you build up a profile of how these centres have grown over the last 5-10 years. And some of the statistics are right up to date 2011, some of them are 2006, because on some of the categories that I'm going to show, the census data is not out yet, but will be out later on, April, May, and so on this year. Which is to give you a kind of a profile. So looking at it in terms of infrastructure, say the Dublin-Belfast one, we have good levels of infrastructure. There's rail, road, port, airport activity. In terms of population, you can see here that there is strong population growth. And there's actually the kind of white, more premium areas is where there's been some levels of population decline. So that you can see that people are being pushed out from the city centre. In terms of density, though, you can see the density is increasing along this corridor. Employment, I was quite taken by this image, because there's a lot of white area here, and yet this is our primary economic corridor for Ireland, and that was quite startling. Now, I do say this is 2006 figures, so it's gone up and gone down again, but that was quite stark, that figure there, that graph to me. However, education is very strong along this. So obviously, again, this is leading me to build up the picture. We have a very well-educated workforce. The socioeconomic profile, this is our levels of managers, professionals, people self-employed, etc. Again, is very strong along this corridor. So again, it's shown that we have a good base. Looking at Dublin-Cork, again, these are the same images again, the same statistics being shown up, and it's get you to build up a picture of that. So you can see again, there's been population change, high levels of density as you would expect around main centres, good levels of employment actually, higher than actually the Dublin-Belfast corridor. Again, strong education, very strong education, and the socioeconomic profile is quite good as well. Dublin-Galway, good infrastructure, less population change in the centres. Again, you think to be higher there with the Midlands. Good density though, again. Employment quite strong. Education, again, you can see the dominance of the centres and Athlone in particular. And I felt that this is a kind of a lower profile, socioeconomic profile, than the ones that previously shown. And finally, just looking at the Galway, Limerick, Cork, Waterford, this our Atlantic arc corridor. Good infrastructure, good population change, density, again, where you'd expect in the clusters, employment quite strong, education very strong again, and socioeconomic profile. However, what is interesting to note is that if you look at what we call the gross value added, the region's actually doing quite well, with the exception of the southeast, which I was quite taken by. Again, the latest statistics we have on that is 2009, and the index for the southeast region is actually declining, and all the rest of them are staying stable and increasing. So that's a bit of a worry down for that southeast region, how that can be addressed. But what I'm trying to put forward is the use of these centres, the use of our linkages, and that by developing up these, we can get this concept of polycentric urban regions. And these regions, this concept is quite strong throughout the world. And I'm just going to put up a few ideas, not to say that we can ever reach these type of levels in Ireland, but like there is potential for us to consider them in these areas. So we have the Randstad, like this is the Randstad ring, where you have huge levels of interconnectivity between The Hague, Rotterdam, Utrecht, Amsterdam. We have the Rhine-Ruhr, and you can see there the clustering of activity there. We have the Flemish Diamond with Ghent, Brussels, Antwerp. And then finally we have the Japan Kansai. Again, it's shown that by clustering and by working together and building on synergies, that we can develop and enhance our profile. So having kind of set the scene somewhat, and we've got a feeling, yes, that we have these regions, we have primary centres, there has been growth, there has been kind of areas of decline. What we need to do is, to enhance all this, is to look at a new approach, a more evidence-based approach, that we can basically lift up these areas, with the resultant being that by lifting these, there'll be spin-offs then for the larger size centres, and that they will rise as well with it. So we need to focus on evidence-based strategic planning. And to me, strategic spatial planning is about the nature of places and how they function. That, to me, is as simple as how it is. We need to think of it in terms of thematic and different themes, and I'll touch on some of those thematic areas in a minute. But that this framework is both linked and integrated. So we're linking policy with practice. And there has been a disconnect between that and the past. Some areas there has been policy linkages with practice, and other areas there hasn't. So it's very important that we get this linkage. As we know, and no greater time than now to realise it, but planning is very dynamic and is changing all the time. And the more evidence you can bring into that, the better will be the result of this planning by encapsulating this framework. And I suppose one of the biggest things that we're trying to achieve, and particularly with these urban centres, is this creation of critical mass, and basically what critical mass is. So we need to provide a comprehensive supporting framework to help us through the decision-making framework right through from conception to completion. And just some ideas of critical mass. What critical mass should do is provide long-term sustainable direction for planning. It's about matching facilities and services with people and their demands. So it's about reinforcing population, skills, innovation, business and transport. And just some examples of critical mass here. We have kind of absolute crazy critical mass down in Venezuela in housing. New York, the skyline. We have a more sustainable formed critical mass in Rotterdam. And then we have, this is a cycle campaign in Germany, and they actually call themselves the Critical Mass Campaign. And the people who know me, I cycle an awful lot, and if you look closely, you might see me in there somewhere. I jest. But this is about conjuring up different ideas of what critical mass is. And what we in Ireland, for our urban centres, will have different notions and aspirations of critical mass, but it's about achieving this sustainable level. And bringing that then forward into the actual workings of an approach, we need to look at key data, both at national, regional, local, and using this data to formulate key drivers and how those drivers then can be assessed against critical mass, whether they be sufficient or insufficient. And those I mentioned about a thematic framework that we should consider using. These are some of the key areas of the framework. Like in terms of strategic spatial structure, that's actually our population, the size of our population, our economic prosperity, the dynamic between urban and rural, transportation, infrastructure, education, quality of life. And by satisfying these, that will have an enhancement of foreign direct investment, indigenous investment, and general growth and uplifting of the whole of these centres and the spin-offs from it. And bringing that forward then, it needs to be formulated into a strategy, identification analysis of our key areas and of priority projects and initiatives, coordinating these, and then linking this into an evidence-based strategic evaluation process. So again, it's looking at the full circle as opposed to looking at bits and pieces of it under these thematic areas. Looking at it in terms then of what are these drivers, examples of some of these drivers. So again, under the thematic areas, we can talk about population, labour force, urban compactness, accessibility to rail and road, provision of water, sewage treatment facilities, provision of education, levels of education attainment in our skills base, and then recreational and amenity facilities. So all of these, getting the evidence behind those and seeing what this means then for going forward and generating sustainable levels of critical mass. And just say focusing on the Dublin, the GDA area, and what levels of indicators have been developed or we can use to assess the GDA's position. We've had historic and future population growth. There is, at the moment, as John mentioned and Austin mentioned, there is a stabilisation now of the labour force and employment in the GDA, so hopefully that will be at the bottom, hopefully, as we spoke before. We have a good range of dynamic urban-rural form between the mix of large urban, large centres of population growth. We have good transportation. We need to focus on infrastructure and facilities in terms of water, sewage, energy, etc. We have a very high level of skills base and education within the GDA, and also quality of life in the environment. So by looking at those 7 thematic areas, you can see that by focusing on those, getting the data behind those, projecting that data forward, using the evidence base that yes, we can look at these centres and focus on them and get growth and activity and investment back into them. Looking at what this means, because at the bottom line to primarily everybody here is looking at this long-term economic value, which has come from the NAMA Act, and what this long-term economic value means. And I was toying with it for a long time of what this actual definition means. And I just came up with my own simple idea, my own simple definition of it. What it means to me as a spatial urban planner is the value that can be attained and sustained based on existing and future attributes or characteristics of an area. So if you increase or enhance the attributes or characteristics of an area, your long-term economic value should increase. You have to do it in a sustainable manner, in an evidence-based manner, but to me that is the bottom line, by looking at the attributes and enhancing those attributes by making it much more sustainable going forward. And then bringing those, that concept, that simple process, that simple definition to full circle. It's bringing 3 strands of where we're at the moment together in an integrated fashion. It's looking at planning and strategic planning and the evaluation of that. It's looking at market value, assessing market value, as John said earlier, what people are willing to pay for a property, for an investment. and looking at the cost evaluation of that. So it's bringing those three concepts together in a much more holistic approach, in a more evidence-based approach. So very simply, in summary, a couple of points to get across is we do have significant strengths to build on, primarily around our major urban centres. We need to focus on these specific areas, and in doing that, we can build on our urban centres, and through the multiplier effect, we can look at the benefits that will be enhanced and realised by lower size centres. Not necessarily lower size in a hierarchical fashion, but lower size in terms of size of population, employment activity, etc. We must focus on job creation and innovation. That's the key. And like advancements in ICT, in our science, in our food or agri-food businesses are really good stories that we are telling now around